Riley Chun lay halfway inside an access panel, grease smearing across her cheek as she tightened another connection. The hum of the steadfast wind's engines filled the cramped maintenance corridor like a living thing. She had been working on this freighter for 8 months now, and she knew every rattle, every vibration, every sound that meant something was about to go wrong. Today, that sound was a high-pitched whine coming from the primary drive coupling. Riley, status report. Captain Torrin's voice crackled through her communicator. The Valnor captain rarely showed emotion, but Riley detected a thin edge of concern in his words. "Give me 2 minutes," Riley called back, twisting another bolt into place. Her fingers moved quickly despite the awkward angle. Growing up on a struggling colony world meant learning to fix things with whatever you had. Proper tools were a luxury. Improvisation was survival. The whine stopped. Riley pulled herself out of the panel and wiped her hands on her already dirty coveralls. "Fixed. Should hold for another few weeks, but we need replacement parts at the next station." "Acknowledged." The communicator went silent. Riley gathered her tools and headed toward the crew commons. The ship carried cargo between the outer colonies and core worlds, a journey that took months even with faster-than-light drives. The crew was small. Captain Torrin commanded with quiet efficiency. Fies, the ship's engineer, was a Corthan who treated the engines like sacred relics. Kess, the navigator, was a Daryl whose species had been exploring space for 3,000 years longer than humans, in the commons. Fies was examining a data screen with intense focus. The Corthan's 4 arms moved in complex patterns, adjusting settings and recording readings. Their scaled hide reflected the blue light from the displays. "Problem?" Riley asked. "Observation." Fies replied without looking up. "The efficiency rating has dropped 0.3% in the past cycle. Within acceptable parameters, but notable." Riley leaned over to check the numbers. To her human eyes, 0.3% seemed tiny, but she had learned that other species took these measurements seriously. They worked within established ranges, treating any deviation as significant. "Could be the coupling I just fixed," Riley suggested. "Might have been pulling extra power." "Perhaps." Fies finally looked at her. "You repair things differently than standard protocols recommend." It was not quite an accusation, but not quite a compliment either. "I fix things so they work," Riley said with a shrug. "Sometimes the manual does not account for reality." Fies made a sound that might have been disapproval. The manuals contain centuries of accumulated knowledge. They exist because countless engineers have tested and verified the proper methods. Riley decided not to argue. She had this conversation before with various crew members. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for 40 years. Other species have been traveling the stars for millennia. They had figured things out long ago and created systems that worked. Why question what already functions? But Riley could not help questioning. It was just how her mind worked. The next few days passed normally. Riley fixed minor issues, checked systems, and kept the ship running. Then, halfway through the journey to their next destination, everything changed. Riley woke to alarms. Red lights flashed in her quarters as the ship's emergency system activated. She pulled on her clothes and ran toward the engine room, her heart pounding. The corridor was filled with crew members moving with controlled urgency. Captain Torrin stood outside the engine room, his face tight with stress. "Report," he ordered as Fies emerged from inside. "Primary drive has failed," Fies said, his 4 arms gesturing helplessly. "The coupling matrix collapsed. We are operating on secondary systems only." "How long until we reach the nearest station?" Torrin asked Kess, who had appeared beside them. The navigator checked her handheld device. "At current speed, 7 months. If we ration carefully, we have sufficient supplies for 5 months." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "Can we repair the drive?" Torrin asked. Fies shook his head. "The matrix is beyond repair. It would require replacement parts we do not carry. Even if we had them, the installation would require a proper shipyard. These systems have hard limits, Captain. Once certain components fail, there is no field solution." Riley pushed closer. "Let me see the damage." "There is nothing to see," Fies said flatly. "The technology has fundamental limits." This is known. Every species has accepted this for thousands of years. But what actually broke? Riley insisted. Fies led her inside. The engine room was a mess of exposed systems and blinking warning lights. He pointed to a section of the drive assembly. The coupling matrix channels faster than light energy. When it fails, the ship cannot exceed light speed. This is basic physics. Riley studied the broken component. Her mind was already working through possibilities, seeing connections that might exist. What if we rerouted power through the secondary manifolds and used the cargo bay generators as a boost? Every alien in the room turned to stare at her. That violates 7 different safety protocols, Fies said slowly, as if explaining to a child. The systems are not designed to interface. The energy feedback would destroy the ship. Maybe, Riley said, or maybe those protocols assume normal operating conditions. They assume reality. Torin interrupted. Riley, I appreciate your willingness to help, but this situation has occurred before. The Galactic Engineering Council has investigated every possible solution. There are limits to what technology can do. We must accept that and prepare for a long journey. Riley wanted to argue, but she saw the finality in his expression. These beings had been traveling space for thousands of years. Who was she to question their accumulated wisdom? But as the crew dispersed to begin rationing procedures and settling in for months of slow travel, Riley could not stop thinking. She returned to her quarters and pulled up technical manuals on her personal terminal. She read specifications, studied energy flow diagrams, and reviewed the history of faster-than-light travel. Hours passed. The ship drifted through empty space, moving at a crawl compared to its normal speed. And slowly, Riley began to see something. A pattern, a possibility. The limits everyone accepted were not actually physical laws. There were safety margins, rules created after an ancient disaster, rules that had never been questioned because they worked well enough. But well enough and actually impossible were 2 different things. Riley sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She could fix this. She was almost certain she could fix this. But it would mean doing something that every other species considered impossible. That it would mean breaking the rules that had stood for thousands of years. She took a deep breath and made her decision. 3 days into the crisis, Riley requested a meeting with Captain Torin. She found him in his office, reviewing supply inventories with the grim focus of someone calculating survival odds. Captain, I need to show you something. Torin looked up from his screen. His species aged differently than humans, but Riley could see the weight of command in his eyes. If this is about the drive, Riley, we have already established there is no solution. Just hear me out. Please. Riley held up her data pad. I have been studying the coupling matrix failure. You are right that it cannot be repaired, but I think we can work around it. The Engineering Council has documented 47 similar incidents over the past millennium, Torrance said patiently. Each time, the conclusion was the same. The technology has inherent limits. We must accept reality. But why? Riley set her data pad on his desk, displaying her calculations. Every explanation I read says the same thing. The systems cannot be combined because of energy feedback. But when I run the actual numbers, the feedback is only dangerous if you use standard power routing. If we modify the flow pattern, the energy dissipates safely. Torin studied the screen. This routing pattern violates fundamental design principles. It violates design traditions, Riley corrected. There is a difference. These systems were built separately because that was the safest approach for normal operations. But we are not in normal operations. We are stranded. You are young, Torrance said, not unkindly. You have been in space for less than a year. Fies has been an engineer for 30 years. Kess has navigated for 40. The collective experience of this crew spans more than a century. Do you truly believe you see something we all miss? Riley felt frustration rising in her chest. I believe I see it differently. On my home world, we had to fix things with whatever we had. We could not afford to replace everything that broke. We learned to make things work in ways they were not designed for. That is fine for small repairs, Torrance said. But this is the ship's primary drive system. A mistake here does not mean a broken tool. It means all of us die in an explosion or a dimensional breach. I know the risks. Do you? Torrin stood up, his full height making Riley feel very small. 300 years ago, a Corthan engineer tried something similar. He believed he could improve drive efficiency by combining systems. His ship vanished. 200 crew members gone in an instant. That incident led to the safety protocols we follow today. They are not arbitrary rules, Riley. They are written in blood. Riley met his gaze. What happened to that ship? It was destroyed. But how? What specifically went wrong? Torrin paused. The records indicate a catastrophic energy cascade. Caused by what? The exact mechanism was never determined. The ship was simply gone. Riley leaned forward. So we do not actually know what killed them. We just know they tried something unconventional and died. That could mean 1,000 different things. Maybe they made a calculation error. Maybe their equipment was faulty. Maybe they did it right, but something else failed. We assume their approach was wrong because they died, but we do not know that for certain. The council investigated thoroughly. The council concluded it was too dangerous to try again, Riley said. That is not the same as proving it is impossible. It just means they decided the risk was not worth it. But our situation is different. We are already dead if we do nothing. 5 months of supplies for a 7-month journey. The math is simple. Torrin sat back down heavily. Let me think about this. Riley left the office and returned to work. But word of her proposal spread through the small crew. That evening in the Commons, Fies confronted her. I heard you suggested combining the drive manifolds with the cargo generators, the Corthan said. His 4 arms were crossed in a way that clearly indicated disapproval. This idea is dangerous and disrespectful. Disrespectful, Riley asked. To the engineers who established these protocols. To the crews who died learning these limits. You dismiss their sacrifice by assuming you know better. I am not dismissing anything, Riley said carefully. I respect what they learned, but they were trying to improve normal operations. We are trying to survive an emergency. Different situations might need different solutions. Kess, the navigator, joined the conversation. Her species was known for careful, logical thinking. Riley, I mean no offense, but your species has been building faster-than-light ships for only 4 decades. We have been doing this for 3,000 years. The mathematical certainty of these limits has been proven repeatedly. Has it? Riley pulled out her data pad again. Show me the proof. Show me the actual test results that demonstrate this specific configuration is impossible. Kess accessed the Galactic database. They spent the next hour reviewing old reports and studies. Each time Kess pulled up a document proving the limits, Riley asked questions. Why was that variable set that way? What if you changed this assumption? Did they test this specific combination? Finally, Kess set down her device. You are correct that this exact configuration has not been tested, but that is because it falls outside all established safety parameters. Parameters are not laws, Riley said quietly. They are guidelines, careful boundaries drawn to keep us safe. I understand why they exist, but sometimes you have to step outside the safe zone to survive. Your species is reckless, Fies said bluntly. Riley thought about that. Maybe. Or maybe we just have a different relationship with rules. On Earth, we have a saying, rules are made to be broken. It sounds stupid, I know, but the idea is that rules should be questioned, not ignored but examined. If a rule makes sense, follow it. If it does not fit the situation, change it. That philosophy leads to chaos, Fies said. It also leads to progress, Riley countered. Humans figured out flight because 2 brothers questioned the rule that heavier-than-air objects could not fly. We broke the sound barrier because someone questioned whether that was actually a limit. We reached faster-than-light travel by questioning Einstein's equations. Every major advancement came from someone saying, but what if the rule is wrong? The Commons fell silent. Other crew members had gathered to listen. Riley could see a mix of reactions. Some looked thoughtful. Others looked horrified at her casual dismissal of established wisdom. Captain Torrin appeared in the doorway. I have made a decision, he announced. Riley, you may proceed with your modifications, but I am documenting that this is against my better judgment and the judgment of the senior crew. If this fails, The responsibility is yours alone. Riley felt the weight of that responsibility settle on her shoulders. She nodded. I understand. I will need help, though. I cannot do this alone. I will assist, Fies said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at the engineer. Not because I believe this will work, but because if we're going to die attempting the impossible, I prefer to understand how it kills us. It was perhaps the most backhanded support Riley had ever received, but she would take it. The work began immediately. Riley spread her technical diagrams across the engine room floor, showing Fies exactly what she intended to do. The Corthan studied each detail with intense focus, his four arms moving in patterns that Riley had learned meant deep concentration. This connection here, Fies pointed to a junction in Riley's design. The energy flow will create a feedback loop. Standard safety measures will shut down the system before it reaches operational levels. So we disable the safety measures, Riley said. Every crew member in the room froze. Fies stared at her with an expression that might have been horror or respect. She could not tell which. You want to disable the automatic safety systems, Fies said slowly. The systems designed to prevent exactly the kind of catastrophic failure that destroyed that Corthan ship 3 centuries ago. Yes. Riley met his gaze steadily. The safety systems are programmed to stop this because it looks dangerous. But the danger they are programmed to prevent assumes we're trying to run both systems at full power simultaneously. We are not. We're using the cargo generators to create a controlled boost that supplements the manifolds without overloading them. The safety system cannot tell the difference. It just sees the configuration and panics. Because the configuration is inherently unstable, another crew member said. No, really insistive. Because it is unfamiliar. There's a difference. Look at the math. If we route the power in this specific sequence, the energy levels stay within safe ranges. Unconventional ranges, yes. Outside standard parameters, definitely. But not actually dangerous. Fies studied the calculations again. His arms moved rapidly across his datapad, checking her work. Minutes passed in tense silence. Finally, he looked up. The mathematics are sound. I cannot find an error in your calculations. But mathematics in theory, in reality, and practice are not always the same thing. I know, Riley said. That is why we test it in stages. We do not throw a switch and hope. We bring each system online slowly. We monitor everything. At the first sign of actual danger, we shut it down. And if the danger appears faster than we can react. Riley had no good answer for that. They both knew some cascades happened in milliseconds. If something went truly wrong, they would not have time to stop it. They would just die. I am not asking anyone to take a risk they are uncomfortable with, Riley said to the assembled crew. I need help with this, but I will understand if you cannot be part of it. This goes against everything you have been taught. I get that. 2 crew members immediately left. Riley did not blame them. 3 others remained, including Fies and a young Daryl technician named Sela who had joined the ship only a month before Riley. I want to help, Sela said quietly. My family thinks I'm crazy for working on a human-crewed ship. They say humans are unpredictable and dangerous. Maybe they are right. But I have watched you work, Riley. You fix things that should not be fixable. Maybe that means you can fix this too. Over the next 5 days, they worked almost without rest. Riley designed each connection. Fies calculated the precise energy flows. Sela ran simulations. They built the new configuration piece by piece, always aware that a single mistake could kill them all. The hardest part was not the technical work. It was convincing themselves to actually do it. On the 6th day, Captain Torin called a crew meeting. Everyone gathered in the commons, even those who had refused to help with the modifications. We are at a decision point, Torin said. Riley's modifications are complete. The new system is ready to test. By every standard protocol, what we are about to attempt is forbidden. The Galactic Engineering Council would revoke this ship's operating license if they knew. More importantly, the attempt may kill us all. He paused, looking at each crew member. But our current trajectory leads to certain death by starvation. We have 63 days of supplies remaining. The nearest station is still 140 days away at our current speed. Riley's modification might restore faster-than-light capability, or it might destroy us instantly. I am giving each of you the choice. We can continue as we are and die slowly but safely within established parameters. Or we can attempt Riley's solution and risk dying quickly in an explosion. I will not order anyone to participate. This must be a choice. The silence stretched out. Riley felt every eye in the room on her. She was asking them to trust her judgment over thousands of years of collective wisdom. She was asking them to bet their lives on the intuition of a species that had barely learned to leave their own planet. I vote we try, Silas said. I would rather die trying than die waiting. Agreed, Fies added. His support surprised Riley more than anything else. One by one, the crew voted. When the count finished, the decision was unanimous. They would attempt the impossible. Riley returned to the engine room with Fies and Sela. They ran through final checks, confirming every connection 3 times. Riley's hands shook slightly as she initialized the first sequence. Months of studying human history made her think of all the pioneers who had died attempting the impossible. Flight, space travel, faster-than-light drives. Each breakthrough was built on a foundation of failures and explosions and deaths. She really hoped she was building on that foundation rather than adding to it. First system online, she announced. The cargo generators hummed to life, their power output feeding into the new connection array. So far, nothing exploded. Readings are stable, Fies confirmed. Energy flow is within predicted ranges. This is unexpected. Second system, Riley continued. She brought the manifold boosters online. The ship vibrated slightly as new power surged through systems that were never designed to work together. Alarms began to sound. The safety systems detected the unconventional configuration and started screaming warnings. Red lights flashed throughout the engine room. Override the safeties, Riley said. Are you certain? Fies asked. No, but do it anyway. Fies entered the override codes. The alarms went silent. The lights returned to normal. But Riley could feel the difference. The ship was alive in a new way. Power flowed through circuits and patterns that should not exist. Energy levels are rising, Sela reported, approaching faster-than-light threshold. The drive is responding. Riley held her breath. This was the moment. Either her calculations were correct and they would survive, or they were wrong and everyone would die. There was no middle ground. Engaging primary drive, she said. She activated the final sequence. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Then the ship lurched. Reality bent around them in ways that made Riley's stomach flip. The faster-than-light drive came online with a sound like thunder. They were moving. They were actually moving at faster-than-light speeds, using a configuration that every expert said was impossible. Riley started laughing. She could not help it. The relief, the shock, the sheer absurdity of it all came out as laughter that bordered on hysteria. Fies checked his instruments with all 4 arms working simultaneously. This should not work. According to everything I know, this should not work. But it does, Riley said. It does. Fies agreed, and there was wonder in his voice. For the first hour, nobody believed it would last. The crew kept waiting for the catastrophic failure that 3 centuries of engineering wisdom promised. Riley stayed in the engine room, watching every reading with exhausting intensity. Fies remained by her side, his 4 arms constantly adjusting and monitoring different systems. Energy efficiency is actually higher than normal operations, Fies said, his voice carrying a tone of disbelief. We are traveling at 0.97 times our previous maximum speed, but consuming 15% less power. This violates thermodynamic principles. Maybe it just violates our understanding of those principles, Riley suggested. She was bone-tired, but could not stop grinning. Maybe we have been operating under assumptions that were never quite right. Kess appeared in the doorway. The navigator's expression was difficult to read. I need to show you something. They followed her to the bridge where her navigation console displayed their current position. According to my instruments, we have traveled further in 1 hour than we should be able to travel in 3. I have run diagnostics 5 times. The instruments are functioning correctly. We're simply moving much faster than should be possible. Captain Torin stood looking out the main viewport. Space flowed past in the strange, distorted way it always did during faster-than-light travel. But something about it looked different. More intense. More alive. "What have you done, Riley?" Torin asked quietly. "I think I removed a bottleneck nobody knew existed," Riley said. "The standard drive configuration works. It has always worked, but it was designed conservatively, with huge safety margins built in. Those margins made sense when we were still figuring out faster-than-light travel. But maybe after thousands of years of safe operation, we did not need such large margins anymore. The technology improved, but the protocols stayed the same. So we have been artificially limiting ourselves," Torin said. "Not artificially. Carefully. Conservatively. Safely." Riley chose her words with care. "But yes, limiting ourselves. The speed we consider maximum was actually just the speed we considered maximally safe. There was always more potential in the systems. We just never pushed them because we were afraid to." Sela ran more calculations at a nearby console. "At this rate, we will reach our destination in 12 days instead of 7 months. The nearest station is now only 3 days away." The implications hung in the air. They were not just going to survive. They were going to arrive weeks ahead of schedule using a method that the entire galactic community considered impossible. "We need to report this," Kess said. "Report what?" Fize asked. "That we violated every safety protocol and somehow survived? That we disabled systems specifically designed to prevent what we did? The Engineering Council will not celebrate this. They will investigate us. They will investigate the method," Torin corrected. "And if it proves reliable, they will have to acknowledge it. Riley, I need you to document everything. Every calculation, every modification, every decision. We need a complete record." The next 3 days felt unreal. The ship continued operating at impossible speeds without any problems. Riley slept in short intervals, always worried she would wake to alarms and disaster. But the alarms never came. The disaster never happened. The ship just kept flying, steady and strong, proving that everything they thought they knew was incomplete. Other crew members began treating Riley differently. Some with respect, some with fear, a few with both. She had broken the fundamental rules and succeeded. That made her either brilliant or dangerous, possibly both. On the 3rd day, they detected the station. Kess established communication and requested docking clearance. "Steadfast Wind, you are not scheduled to arrive for another 6 months," the station controller said. "Please confirm your identity." "Identity confirmed," Torin replied. "We experienced a drive failure and implemented emergency repairs. We are requesting immediate docking. Stand by." The communication went silent for several minutes. When it returned, a different voice spoke. "Steadfast Wind, this is Station Director Haven. Your transponder confirms your identity, but your arrival time is impossible. You departed Outpost Kira 41 days ago. The minimum travel time on that route is 5 months. Please explain." Torin looked at Riley. She stepped forward to the communication panel. "Director, this is Riley Chun, maintenance technician. We developed a modified drive configuration that significantly increased our speed. All crew are safe. The ship is functional. We request permission to dock and share our technical data." Another long pause. "Permission granted. Dock at Base 7. A full inspection team will meet you." The ship approached the station slowly. Through the viewport, Riley could see the massive structure growing larger. Hundreds of ships of various sizes were docked along its exterior. This was one of the major hub stations, serving thousands of travelers and crew members. They docked smoothly. As the airlock connected, Riley felt nervousness replace her earlier excitement. She had proven her modifications worked, but now she had to explain them to people who had spent lifetimes believing they were impossible. The inspection team that boarded included 2 engineers, a safety inspector, and a council representative. They were all different species, but they all wore the same expression of deep skepticism. "Show us what you did," the lead engineer demanded. For the next 6 hours, Riley walked them through every modification. She showed them her calculations. She explained her reasoning. She demonstrated the current operation of the system. The inspection team asked hundreds of questions, each one sharp and probing. Finally, the lead engineer stepped back. This should not work. But it does, Riley said simply. It does. The engineer agreed reluctantly. I cannot explain why. The theory suggests this configuration should create a catastrophic feedback loop. Yet here you are, alive and traveling at speeds we considered impossible. Either our theory is wrong, or something else is happening that we do not understand. The council representative spoke for the first time. This incident will be reported to the Galactic Engineering Council. They will want to examine your ship and your methods in detail. You understand that you violated numerous regulations. We were dying, Torrin said firmly. We had no choice but to attempt an unconventional solution. Perhaps. The representative did not sound convinced. But the implications are significant. If your method is viable, it changes everything we know about faster-than-light travel. And if it is not viable, if you simply survive through luck, then you risked your crew and your ship for nothing. It was not luck, Riley said. It was engineering. Different engineering than you're used to. Yes. But still engineering based on solid mathematics and careful testing. The representative studied her for a long moment. You are human. Your species has been part of our community for barely any time at all. Yet you claim to have discovered something that thousands of years of engineering expertise missed. You can understand why we are skeptical. Riley understood. But understanding did not make it less frustrating. Being new does not make us wrong. It just means we see things differently. Maybe that is exactly what was needed. Maybe the problem required a perspective that was not trapped by thousands of years of assumptions. The inspection team left, taking copies of all Riley's documentation with them. The crew was cleared to continue to their original destination, but they were ordered to keep the modified drive system in place so other engineers could examine it. Word spread quickly through the station. By the time Steadfast Wind prepared to depart, dozens of ships were requesting information about the impossible human modification. Engineers from multiple species wanted details. Ship captains wanted to know if they could implement similar changes. Riley stood on the bridge as they undocked, watching the station recede behind them. She had wanted to solve one problem, to save one ship. Instead, she had apparently started something much larger. How do you feel? Torrin asked. Riley considered the question. Tired. Nervous. Like I just opened a door I cannot close. You did, Torrin said. The question now is what comes through that door. News traveled faster than even Riley's modified ship. By the time Steadfast Wind reached its destination 4 days later, the story had spread across a dozen systems. The impossible human who broke the rules and survived. The crew that flew faster than physics allowed. The modification that should have killed them, but instead revolutionized travel. The reality was less dramatic than the stories, but that did not stop the stories from spreading. They docked at Port Meridian, a major commercial hub. Before they could even finish the docking sequence, Riley's communicator filled with messages. Engineers wanting her data. Captains wanting consultations. News services wanting interviews. The Galactic Engineering Council wanting her presence at an emergency hearing. You have become famous, Fies observed. The Corthan had stayed remarkably calm through everything, though Riley caught him staring at the modified drive systems with an expression that might have been betrayal at the universe for not working the way he thought it did. I do not want to be famous, Riley said. I just wanted to not die. Too late for that now. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later at council headquarters. In the meantime, Riley found herself besieged by requests. Some were professional, engineers with legitimate questions about the technical details. Others were strange. A documentary crew wanted to follow her around. A ship manufacturer offered her a massive consulting contract. Someone even asked for her autograph. The weirdest request came from a Corthan engineer named Brex, who claimed Riley had desecrated the memory of his ancestor, the engineer who died in the disaster 300 years ago. The angry message filled Riley's screen with accusations of arrogance and recklessness and disrespect for established wisdom. Riley read it twice, then composed a careful response. I do not mean disrespect to your ancestor. His sacrifice taught us to be careful. That lesson was valuable. But being careful does not mean never trying new things. It means being smart about how we try them. I tested my modifications carefully. I documented everything. I was willing to stop if it failed. That is what being careful means to me. She did not receive a reply. More interesting were the reports coming from other ships. 3 vessels had already attempted to replicate Riley's modifications with varying results. One succeeded and reported similar improvements. One failed and had to revert to standard configuration. One succeeded initially but then experienced system instability after 2 days and shut everything down. The mixed results made Riley nervous. She had proven it could work on steadfast wind, but that did not mean it would work everywhere or for everyone. Variables she had not considered might matter. Equipment differences, maintenance history, crew training. All of it could affect outcomes. The hearing approached. Riley spent her nights preparing documentation and her days answering technical questions from engineers across the galaxy. She barely slept. Fies and Sela helped, explaining details and running additional tests to confirm their results. Captain Torrin remained supportive but quiet. Riley suspected he was dealing with his own inquiries from shipping companies and regulators wondering why he had allowed such dangerous modifications. Finally, the day came. Riley traveled to Council headquarters, a massive orbital facility that served as the central authority for all space travel regulations. The building itself was impressive. Thousands of engineers and administrators from dozens of species worked here, maintaining the standards that kept galactic commerce functioning. The hearing room was smaller than Riley expected. A semicircle of seats held 5 council members, each from a different species. They represented the accumulated technical knowledge of civilizations that had been exploring space for millennia. Riley felt very small and very young. Riley Chun, the lead council member, began. You stand accused of violating 7 major safety protocols, disabling critical safety systems, and implementing unauthorized modifications to a faster-than-light drive. How do you plead? I do not dispute the facts, Riley said carefully. I did those things, but I had good reasons. Explain your reasons. Riley took a deep breath and began. She described the drive failure, the impossible choice between slow death and trying something dangerous. Her analysis of the safety protocols and her discovery that they were based on assumptions rather than hard limits. Her careful testing and documentation. The successful outcome. The council members listened without interrupting. When Riley finished, they conferred quietly among themselves. Your technical work is sound, one council member finally said. We have reviewed your calculations and your documentation. The modifications should theoretically work, though we do not fully understand why. However, that is not the issue. The issue is that you violated regulations that exist to protect lives. The regulations would have killed us, Riley said. Following proper procedure meant dying slowly while we waited for rescue that would never come in time. I chose to try something else. You chose to gamble with the lives of your crew. I chose to give them a chance to live. There is a difference. Another council member spoke. We have received reports from 3 other ships attempting similar modifications. 1 succeeded. 2 experienced problems. Your method is not universally reliable. No method is universally reliable, Riley countered. Standard drives fail. Ships get stranded. Kosti. We accept those risks because we understand them. My modification adds a new risk, yes, but it also adds new capability. The question is not whether it is perfectly safe. Nothing is perfectly safe. The question is whether the benefits justify the risks. That is exactly the question, the lead council member agreed. And it is a question we must answer for the entire galactic community, not just for one human engineer who survived a crisis. The hearing continued for hours. Technical experts testified. Other engineers presented their analysis. Ship captains shared their concerns. Through it all, Riley defended her work without apologizing for it. Finally, the council announced they needed time to deliberate. Riley was dismissed to wait for their decision. She found Fies and Sela waiting outside the hearing room. How did it go? Sela asked. I have no idea, Riley admitted. They waited for 3 days. Riley spent the time in her temporary quarters. reviewing her documentation for the 100th time. She thought about all the humans throughout history who had faced similar moments. Moments where old rules met new ideas and nobody knew which would prevail. That on the third day, the council recalled her. "We have reached a decision," the lead council member announced. "Your modifications were unauthorized and dangerous. Under normal circumstances, we would revoke your engineering credentials and possibly charge you criminally. However, these are not normal circumstances. You faced an emergency situation and developed an innovative solution. More importantly, your solution works." Riley felt hope rising in her chest. "Therefore, we are implementing the following measures. First, your method will undergo rigorous testing by council engineers. If it proves reliable, we will develop new protocols for its safe implementation. Second, you will work with our technical team to identify which variables affect success rates. Third, all ships using your modification must meet specific standards and have properly trained crews." The council member paused. This is not an endorsement of rule breaking, but it is an acknowledgement that sometimes rules need to change. "You challenged our assumptions, Riley Chun. You made us question limits we thought were absolute. That is uncomfortable but necessary. The galaxy advances through people who ask difficult questions." "Thank you," Riley said. "Do not thank us yet. You now have the responsibility of helping us understand what you did and how to do it safely. That will require months of work." Riley nodded. She could handle that. 6 months later, Riley stood in a laboratory deep inside council headquarters, watching as engineers from 4 different species tested the newest iteration of what they now called the Chun configuration. The name made her uncomfortable, but she had lost that argument early on. The test ship's drive came online smoothly. Energy readings stabilized exactly where the models predicted. After dozens of tests, they had figured out the key variables: ship age, maintenance history, power system quality, and crew training all affected success rates. With proper preparation, the modification worked 93% of the time. The remaining 7% could be predicted and avoided with the right diagnostic tools. "Another success," announced Brex, the Corthan engineer who had initially sent Riley that angry message about disrespecting his ancestor. He had joined the testing team 2 months ago, bringing deep expertise in drive systems. After working together, he and Riley had developed a grudging mutual respect. "This configuration meets all safety standards." "All the new safety standards," Riley corrected. "The old ones would have flagged this as catastrophically dangerous." "The old ones were based on incomplete information," Breck said. "We have better information now. Therefore, we have better standards. This is how engineering progresses." It was a remarkable statement coming from someone who had spent his entire career following protocols established centuries ago. But Riley had learned that many engineers were actually excited about the changes. They had been following rules they did not fully understand. Now they understood better. Some found that liberating. Not everyone agreed. A significant faction within the council still argued that Riley's modifications were dangerous precedents that encouraged recklessness. They worried that allowing one exception would lead to others. That safety culture would degrade if people started questioning every regulation. Riley understood their concerns. She had spent enough time studying galactic history to know that the conservative approach had prevented countless disasters. Ships did not explode every day precisely because of careful protocols and rigorous safety standards. But she also believed that standards needed to evolve, that rules should be living documents, updated as understanding improved. The key was knowing the difference between stupid risk-taking and intelligent innovation. Her communicator chimed. Captain Torin was calling. "Riley, I need you back at the ship. We have a situation." Riley left the laboratory and caught a shuttle to the commercial docks where Steadfast Wind was undergoing upgrades. She found Torin in the cargo bay, talking to a young human engineer who looked barely out of school. "Riley Chun," the young engineer said with obvious excitement. "I have been following your work. I have some ideas about improving the Chun configuration even further. If we modified the power couplings and rerouted the secondary manifolds, I think we could achieve even higher speeds." Riley looked at Torin. The captain's expression was carefully neutral. She turned back to the young engineer. Have you tested these modifications? Well, no, but the theory is sound. I ran some simulations, and the numbers look good. Simulations are not reality, Riley said. Show me your calculations. They spent the next hour reviewing the proposed modifications. The young engineer, whose name was David Park, had good instincts but had missed several critical factors. His modifications would probably work, but they had a higher risk of failure than he realized. The idea has potential, Riley said finally, but you need more testing, more documentation. You need to understand not just what you are changing, but why the current configuration works the way it does. You cannot improve something if you do not fully understand it first. David looked disappointed. But you broke the rules. Everyone says you just ignored the protocols and tried something new. Is that what they say? Riley shook her head. I spent weeks studying the protocols before I changed anything. I did not ignore them. I understood them well enough to know why they existed and how I could work around them. There is a difference between informed rule-breaking and reckless rule-breaking. So I should spend more time studying. You should spend more time understanding. Study, yes, but also talk to experienced engineers. Learn the history. Figure out why things are the way they are. Then, if you still think you have a better way, document it carefully and test it safely. Never risk lives just to prove you are clever. David nodded slowly. That makes sense. Thank you. After he left, Torrin smiled. You sounded like a council instructor. That is a terrifying thought, Riley said. But she understood his point. She had become, against all expectations, part of the establishment. People looked to her for guidance on how to innovate safely. It was a responsibility she had never wanted but could not avoid. Over the following months, the Chun configuration became standard technology. Ship manufacturers began building it into new vessels. Older ships were retrofitted. Travel times across the galaxy decreased by an average of 38%. Trade improved. Communication between distant colonies became easier. The entire galactic economy shifted in small but significant ways. Other innovations followed. Engineers who had spent careers following rules without questioning them now began asking why. So their questions led nowhere. Some led to disasters, but a few led to breakthroughs. A Darrell engineer improved energy shielding by combining systems that were traditionally kept separate. A Corthan mechanic discovered a way to extend ship lifespans by 40% through maintenance techniques that violated standard procedures but actually worked better. The galaxy was changing. Not because Riley had made one modification to one ship, but because she had demonstrated that questioning assumptions was not just reckless rebellion. It was a legitimate path to progress when done carefully and intelligently. Riley eventually returned to Steadfast Wind as a full crew member rather than just maintenance staff. She split her time between working on the ship and consulting with the council on new innovations. It was exhausting but satisfying work. One evening, she sat in the observation lounge with Fies, Sela, and Torrin, watching stars flow past at speeds that had been impossible a year ago. Do you ever wonder what else we are wrong about? Sela asked. The young Darrell had become much more confident in the past year. How many other limits are actually just assumptions? Probably many, Fies said. The Corthan had adapted to the changes better than Riley expected. The question is which ones. Not every limit is an assumption. Some are real. The challenge is knowing the difference. How do we know? Sela asked. We test carefully, Riley said. We question respectfully. We try new things, but we document everything, and we are willing to admit when we are wrong. We remember that rules usually exist for good reasons, even if those reasons are not always obvious. That sounds like a philosophy class, Torrance said. Maybe it is, Riley agreed. Maybe that is what we really changed. Not just the technology, but the philosophy. We proved that healthy systems need both stability and change, both rules and questioning, both tradition and innovation. The trick is keeping them in balance. Outside the viewport, space continued flowing past at impossible speeds. Somewhere far away, another ship was probably testing another new idea. Another engineer was probably questioning another assumption. Some would fail. Some would succeed. That was how progress worked. Riley thought about her home world, where she had learned to fix things with limited resources and constant improvisation. She had brought that mindset to the galaxy, and the galaxy had been changed by it. Not because humans were better than other species, but because they brought a different perspective, a willingness to try things that seemed impossible, a refusal to accept that limits could not be questioned. Stay within your limits, they had warned. But Riley had learned that limits were often just the boundaries of imagination. The real challenge was not staying within limits. It was knowing which limits to respect and which to push beyond. She smiled at her crewmates. They had traveled an impossible journey together. They had changed the galaxy in small but meaningful ways. And they were still flying, still exploring, still discovering what else might be possible if they were brave enough to ask difficult questions. The stars flowed past. The ship flew on, and somewhere ahead, new impossible things waited to become possible.